Hey guys, I'm back with another basics video, and this time I'm going to be talking about micro and macro. Now, what is micro, what is macro, and how can you actually improve upon these? If you like videos like these, please check out others in the series like Tempo, Pokemon Rolls, the early game, and team building. As a professional player, I'd love to share my knowledge with all of you. Now, before I continue, I just want to say that at the time of recording this video, I'm only 20 subscribers away from 5,000. That is a huge milestone, and it would mean the world to me. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button and show the support. I do this full time, and it would just, I would be so incredibly thankful to you. Okay, so let's dive into it. Now, as always, we're not going to go into too much information here. I don't want to overload your brains. I want to teach you the basics of what micro and macro are, and just little ways that you could improve upon them before we go into more detail in later videos. Okay, so what is micro? I'm sure you've heard your favorite streamers and creators and players just talk about micro and macro, and you've probably wondered, what do they mean? What are they talking about? A lot of you don't have MOBA backgrounds, so this is going to be pretty new stuff for you. Simply put, micro is just how well you play your Pokemon. It comes down to the knowledge you have about that Pokemon, everything about it really, and how you perform on it individually, on an individual scale. Having good micro would mean that you're very knowledgeable on the Pokemon that you're playing. You're able to play it above average and particularly well. If you're against the same Pokemon in lane, you'll probably beat it because you have great micro. You're out microing your opponent. Now, if you would have bad micro, that would just mean that you aren't able to perform that well on that particular Pokemon. If you spend all of your time playing something like Pikachu, you're likely not going to be as great as Lucario. Your micro on Pikachu could be incredible, but bad on a Lucario. Some more examples of micro will be something like your last hit securing on the wild Pokemon, knowing those thresholds, knowing how much damage it takes to get that last hit on that Indeedee. If you're playing something like a Cinderace, your ability to move around and kite your opponents and play well at max range at that distance, that stuff is micro. It's all that small stuff, it's ability rotations, it's cooldowns, it's just managing stuff about your Pokemon. So I hope that gives you a decent understanding of micro and what it really is. Now, a way to improve on micro is simple. You just need to practice. You need to practice the Pokemon. Micro is the easier of the two, for sure, to work on and improve because it can all be done on your own and in your own time. You play a Pokemon for long enough, eventually your micro will improve on that Pokemon. Now, yes, eventually you will hit a wall where you feel like you can't improve and other players are outperforming you. That's natural. That's when you look to guides. That's when you look to what other players are doing and try to learn from them. At the end of the day, this is mechanical skill and not all of ours will be the same. And that's okay. We all play at our own pace and we all get there eventually. Now, a lot of you probably have really good micro and you're still losing a lot of your games and wondering why. Honestly, it's probably the next part, and that is macro. Macro is so incredibly important, and it's really what sets players apart. Now, if I was to explain macro really simply, I guess I would say it's using your micro on a map-wide scale. So micro is individual efforts, right? And it affects you and what you do. Now, macro is affecting the team-wide scale, the map-wide scale. It's using your micro and the information you're getting throughout a game to push your advantages and kind of identify win conditions. Macro is really big and it's really important. And if you don't have good macro, you're really going to fall behind because good micro won't carry you against high-level players. You will struggle and you will start to lose games because you're getting out macroed. The enemy teams are out rotating you. They get into things before you. And this is where macro really comes into play. At the end of the day, Pokemon Unite is one based on strategy, not just on mechanics. It's very hard to just mechanically carry a game. You need strategy. You need teams to be rotating on time and where they need to be. And you need to be part of that. I guarantee you a lot of the time, you're probably as much of the problem as you think every other player is. And it's important for you to identify your mistakes and improve them. Now, some more examples of macro to make this a little bit easier to understand are things like invading. Invading is a macro-based decision. It's very helpful to the entire team for you to invade, for you to put the enemy jungler behind and take advantage of them if you feel as though you are stronger than them. Another big one is if you're playing supports, to scout around the map, to get vision for your team and identify enemies on the minimap. This is really helpful, and please, for the love of God, use your minimaps. That is such a big and vital part of the game. Not using your minimap, not checking that constantly is very bad and will have you losing so many more games than you can imagine. If you look at that minimap properly and you're identifying where enemies are and where your team is, you will win at so many more games. Now, I did say macro involves applying your micro into bigger situations, and that's something like, okay, you know your Pokemon really well. Say you're playing an Absol, you know Absol well. Now, they have a Ralts in their lane. You know that you can bully that Ralts and really keep them behind. That is an example of macro. That is what I'm talking about. It's the decisions that you're making based on the knowledge that you have. Now, someone with good macro is someone who can constantly adjust and make good decisions on the fly. The game is not a script. You don't always go to Regieleki. You don't always go to Regice. You have to mix it up based on the situation and based on what's going on. More about that in the tempo video. But in a simpler term, if the enemy team has 5 people at the Regieleki and no one on your team is there, face diving into them is a bad macro decision. Another example of really bad macro are junglers that overstay in lane. You can be really punished for this. If you stay in lane and you just dive goal over and over and over again, your jungle will get taken and you'll be punished on a map-wide scale. Macro decisions are what win and lose you a game, and they are far more important than mechanics in a lot of cases. As well as you need to be able to press the buttons on your character and play them, you need to be able to make decisions as well. Example, if you're up by 400 points, don't just hit the Rayquaza if the enemy team is there. You are throwing your game. That is a bad macro decision. A good macro decision in that case is to play a little more defensively. Don't let the enemies get to Rayquaza, don't let them score goals, maybe even look to score and get a few more points so that at that point Rayquaza becomes negligible. It doesn't even matter if they get it. You need to make good macro decisions as you play the game. You need to adjust on the fly, identify what's happening and how you can turn that into your favor, how you can push those advantages you have, and how you can minimize risk. It's really important to work on your macro. Now, honestly, this is something really hard to work on without a coach unless you're playing at a high level against high level players. I'd honestly suggest watching some good players' streams. Go to YouTube or Twitch and watch your favorite pros and just see what they do. Watch them play, watch where they're going in the map, and try to mirror that for a little while. And eventually you'll start to realize why they're making these decisions. You'll see the improvements in your own game, and it will cause you to win at so many more games. When you watch someone like Chris Heroes play, he's not only winning games because of his mechanical skill, he is a very good player, but he has incredible macro. He's watching timers, he knows when the enemy jungle is coming up, he knows when his is coming up, he's watching where all the enemies are on the minimap, he knows when the objective is worth going for and when not going for. This is something that all the high level players know. It's important to identify these things and make correct decisions. Now, I could go on and on for hours about macro. It is such an in-depth thing to speak about, but I don't want to overload you. As I said, I don't want to overwhelm people. I want to ease people into these things. This is just about the basics. So I really hope I did a decent job at explaining what micro and macro are at a fundamental level and giving you a bit of an idea on how you can kind of work on those or identify if they're the problem in your game. If you like this style of video, please let me know. I love making educational content for you guys and just letting you know the things that go on inside my head. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.